Hi and welcome to today's live chapter reading of Jordan's Justice by T. Christensen, courtesy of Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Tessa squeezed her eyes closed and breathed deeply to try to dissipate the panic locking up her body. This cannot be happening. This cannot be happening. Thanks to the Wish Upon a Star theme on Student Equality Centre I decided on, the ballroom was dimly lit. The lighting must be creating an illusion, making him a figment of her imagination. NBA superstar Jordan Davis had not just walked into her line of vision. Why would he be at a fundraiser for underprivileged kids? Memories of attending her first benefit with him flashed through her head. Stupid question. Why wouldn't he be at this fundraiser? The centre's mission was to provide poverty-stricken children with free tutors. This wasn't a big enough fundraiser to attract the attention of someone of Jordan's calibre, though, right? Tessa clapped her closed hands together to stop them from trembling and dragged in another breath. She cautiously opened her eyes and focused on the spot where Jordan's mirage had been. Little by little, her breathing returned to normal as she broadened her search and still didn't see him. "Are you okay?" Laura, her friend and boss at the centre, startled her out of her obsessive scanning. Tessa smiled. "I'm nervous." "Why am I talking again? Why aren't you?" Laura touched her arm and Tessa realised she was searching the ballroom again. She turned her gaze to Laura's warm blue eyes and tried to soak in her ever-present zen and confidence. "You're the perfect person. You understand the importance of having this resource and you're passionate about it. I believe in what we're doing and what you started. I just hope I can communicate the benefit it offers. Most of these people are far removed from what's happening in the worlds of the children we help." "You will, Tessa. Your speech is amazing." A guest caught Laura's attention and she walked away. Tessa picked up her speech cards and ran through them. She knew the speech by heart, but she was scared she would forget every word as soon as she stood in front of the intimidating crowd. Luckily, she was the first speaker, so she could get it over with early. The spotlight was so bright that Tessa couldn't see the audience, which was a blessing, but she could still feel their eyes. Hopefully they would attribute her flushed and sweaty face to the lights, and not as a sign of her nerves. As soon as Tessa uttered the last word, the stress and anxiety that had locked up her body slid away. Before the last of the applause died, she was off the stage and weaving her way to the table at the back. When she got there, her co-workers stood and clapped for her. Her cheeks heated up, but she was grateful for their support. "Sit down, you idiots," she chuckled as she motioned with her hands. As they settled back down, Tessa took her seat and began eating. Most everyone else had finished during her speech, so she let the conversation drift around her while she enjoyed her meal. There were still a couple of minutes before the next speaker when she was done. Tessa excused herself to go to the restroom. There were several ballrooms in the convention centre, so the bathrooms were in a corridor so that all the rooms could easily access. As she exited the ballroom, a tall man strode towards her. The shadows in the hallway prevented her from seeing his face, but a sense of déjà vu raced across her skin. Goosebumps ran down her arms and her heart thumped. Tessa rubbed her arms and quickened her pace, anxious to get past him. Just as she reached him, his looming shadow stepped in front of her, preventing her from going any further. Her brain screamed, "Caution." "Don't you think it's hypocritical to speak so passionately about children, considering your past actions?" Jordan spewed, every word coated with disdain. The world shifted under her feet and everything stopped. 100 emotions ran through her shocked body in the span of 10 seconds. She'd always prayed she'd never see Jordan again. And if she did, she'd assumed she would have time to prepare for their meeting. The silence grew, and it became increasingly difficult to breathe in the corridor Jordan had trapped her in. Bit by bit, Tessa buried all her emotions until she was numb. It was a trick she had learned and used out of necessity for the past 4 years. "Nothing to say? You actually have a conscience about this?" he sneered. Every word Jordan spoke was grittier and harsher. Tessa took a step back to escape the hate rolling off him, and then another. He stepped forward until she felt the wall at her back. Feeling like a trapped rabbit, she desperately looked around herself for an escape, but Jordan's breadth and height prevented her from seeing anything but him. There's no escape, Tessa. 4 years ago, I was furious when I found out what you did. I don't know what I would do if I saw you, so you got away without retribution. Now fate has brought us together and I intend to take full advantage. Every word created more panic. As her world collapsed around her, she wanted to run home, but she was frozen against the wall. Tessa balled her hands up at her sides and pressed her nails into her palms to think past her rioting emotions, but each inhale of his spicy cologne brought back countless memories she had tried desperately to forget. Jordan's body was coiled in front of her. It felt like he would spring forward to make sure she stayed trapped if she moved even an inch. He clenched his jaw so tightly she could see it ticking. When Tessa finally gathered the courage to truly look at him, she sucked in a shocked gasp and flinched at the pain cutting up her insides. So much coldness filled the twinkling blue eyes she always remembered looking at her with such warmth and humour. They froze her frantic heart. She closed her eyes to escape the venom in them. Jordan slapping his palms on the wall next to her made them fly back open. Say something, damn it. Staring at his bulging neck, Tessa firmly told him, Step back, Jordan. Look at me, he reiterated between clenched teeth. Inhaling, she looked up into his cold, stormy blue gaze. Step back. They silently battled, neither giving an inch, until the click-clack of high heels and the sound of conversation intervened. Jordan stepped back. Just as Tessa let out a breath, he snatched her arm and led her round the corridor until they rounded a corner. When they were in a remote area, Jordan stopped as abruptly as he had started and stared down at her. Does it amuse you how easily you can deceive people? Would you even have a job if they knew you'd had an abortion? Tessa opened her mouth to argue and then snapped it shut. His mum's warning was still fresh in her head even 4 years later. Looking directly into his eyes, she said softly, but with conviction, You have no idea what you're talking about. Jordan took a slight step back and studied her. After what was probably only a few seconds, but felt like an eternity, he asked, Are you saying you didn't take a check for an abortion? Tessa looked away and heard his snort. Forcing her eyes back to his, she ground her teeth together and repeated, You have no idea what you're talking about. Jordan narrowed his eyes and with a sneer skimmed them down her body. Tessa prickled with a sudden awareness of how much skin she was showing. The strapless exposed little black dress with a sweetheart neckline her shoulders. The bottom flared out into a waterfall swing skirt, landing just above her knees. Tessa knew she was underdressed since everyone else had on formal gowns, but this was the only fancy dress she owned. There was no way she could have afforded to buy something more suitable for the benefit, especially when she knew this would be the only place she would ever wear it. When Jordan finished his scathing perusal, he pinned Tessa to her spot with his eyes. In the same cold voice he asked, Do you have any idea what I'm worth now? Tessa was confused. He'd always been worth millions, so she wasn't sure where this question came from or why he'd asked it. Jordan didn't wait for her answer, but he did clear up her confusion with scathing conciseness. I'm worth billions, Tessa. I know the check you got was for more than just the abortion. You demanded extra money from my mother so you wouldn't go to the press. I thought you were smart. You could have asked for millions. Lucky for us, with your low-class stupidity, couldn't comprehend just how much money you could have gotten away with blackmailing us for. Tessa reared back in shocked silence. He thought she'd blackmailed his mum. Before she could process anything he'd just thrown at her, Jordan laughed derisively. I thank God every day your ignorant brain thought $2,000 was a lot of money. You could have taken me for millions, so I guess I should thank you. Jordan's scornful words tore her apart as tears stung in her eyes. He believed what his mum had said. Tessa was gutted, but she needed to talk through the pain. She had to make sure he understood. You think I went to your mum and demanded money? And if she didn't give me money, I would go to the press and tell them about the abortion of our baby. This was an out-of-body experience for Tessa. Her voice sounded steady, even as her entire body shook. Did you think she wouldn't tell me, Tessa? At first she hid it. For weeks I tried to reach you, but it was like you disappeared off the face of the earth. You played me and my mum for fools. I was actually worried about you. Jordan snorted and then grew in front of her, standing up straight and widening his tense body with his fists at his side. He looked down at her with narrowed eyes. My mum was forced to tell me about the blackmail when she realised I was determined to find you, no matter the cost. I thought I was in love with you and you. Jordan sucked in a harsh breath, his disgust clear. You convinced my mum you were pregnant and accepted money for an abortion. The breath left her at the realisation that he didn't even believe she'd been pregnant. He'd been in love with her and ready to leave everything behind to find her. There was too much being thrown at her. White spots filled her vision. She desperately closed her eyes, tried to block out the stone-cold, furious stranger in front of her. Tessa couldn't hold it together anymore, and she didn't matter what she said. Jordan would never believe her, and Mrs. Davis's threat of ruining her family slipped through her. I'm going, Tessa rasped. She moved before Jordan could stop her. From behind, Tessa heard him grit out, Get back here. She kept moving, blocking all of her emotions and not looking back. In a stupor, Tessa grabbed her coat and caught a taxi, finally making it back to her apartment. She allowed nothing to enter her head until she stood in her bedroom. She no longer shared a room with Lindy. Now she shared one with her 3-year-old daughter, Jordis.